The 10,091st meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Ms. Martha Ama Akia-Pobe, Assistant Secretary General for Africa, Department of Political and Peace-Building Affairs and Peace Operations. Ms. Masih Al-Nijad, journalist and political dissident. And Mr. Ahmed Batibi, human rights activist and journalist. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Ms. Martha Ama Akia-Pobe.
Mr. President, for nearly 3 weeks, popular protests in the Islamic Republic of Iran have rapidly evolved into nationwide upheaval, resulting in significant loss of life. Demonstrations started on 28 December 2025 as a group of shopkeepers in Tehran's Grand Bazaar gathered to protest the sharp collapse of the currency and soaring inflation amid a wider economic downturn and worsening living conditions. In the following days, demonstrations quickly spread throughout the country and turned into mass anti-government protests, the largest since the Women Life Freedom demonstrations of 2022. Protesters voiced grievances that went beyond long-standing economic and financial hardships. Marchers called for the downfall of the government and demanded freedom, dignity, and human rights, with some protesters chanting pro-monarchy slogans. The protests were initially peaceful, with scattered clashes between protesters and security forces, according to reports by the media, observations of our United Nations colleagues in the country, and accounts by the government of Iran. However, on the evening of 8th January, protests spread throughout Tehran and major cities. In response, the Iranian authorities imposed a near-total communications blackout, which remains largely in place today. The authorities also ordered university dormitories to be evacuated, erected concrete barriers around city centers, and reportedly used excessive force against protesters. According to media and human rights groups, security forces reportedly killed hundreds or possibly thousands of protesters and bystanders between 8th and 10th January. The United Nations is unable to verify these figures. The government of Iran has stated that it was compelled to act after what it deemed organized terrorists and rioters infiltrated the protests and opened fire on both security forces and demonstrators, aiming to provoke foreign military intervention. It has also blamed these elements for the killing of hundreds of civilians and members of the security forces. Mr. President, The Secretary General has expressed deep concern over the reported excessive use of force in Iran and stressed the urgent need to prevent further casualties. The Secretary General underscored that all Iranians must be able to express their grievances peacefully and without fear. He stressed that the rights to freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly enshrined in international law must be fully respected and protected. He further urged steps to restore access to information, including lifting the communications blackout. Human rights monitors report mass arrests in Iran in connection with the current wave of protests, with estimates exceeding 18,000 detainees as of mid-January 2026, although the UN cannot verify these figures. We call on the authorities to respect due process and fair trial rights for all detainees. All must be treated humanely and allowed access and visits by their families. In particular, we call on Iran to halt any executions linked to protest-related cases. All deaths should be promptly, independently, and transparently investigated. Those responsible for any violations must be held to account in line with international norms and standards. Mr. President, the situation in Iran is fluid and deeply concerning. Protests continue, albeit reportedly at a smaller scale than last week. In this context, we note with alarm various public statements suggesting possible military strikes on Iran. This external dimension adds volatility to an already combustible situation. All efforts must be undertaken to prevent any further deterioration. The Secretary General remains convinced that all concerns regarding Iran, including those related to the nuclear issue and ongoing protests, are best addressed through diplomacy and dialogue. He urges maximum restraint at this sensitive moment and calls on all actors to refrain from any actions that could lead to further loss of life or ignite a wider regional escalation. Mr. President, the Secretary General reaffirms the principles of the Charter, including the obligation of member states to settle disputes by peaceful means and the prohibition of the threat or use of force in international relations. These principles are not abstract ideals. They are the bedrock of international peace and security. They remain as relevant today as they were when the United Nations was founded. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Pope for the briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Masih Ali Najat.
Hello, everyone. My name is Masih Ali Najat. I am a woman from Iran. Mr. President, Excellency, members of the Council, I am honored to be invited by the United States to testify before United Nations Security Council. I am here today to warn you, on behalf of millions of Iranians, what is needed now to bring justice to those who order massacre in Iran is real and concrete action against a regime that do not understand the language of diplomacy. The United Nations has failed to respond with the urgency this moment demands. The Secretary General himself has not spoken publicly against the massacre unfolding in Iran. Only a written statement through his spokesperson, silence at this moment, send a signal, send a message to the killers of young protesters alongside their family members. I strongly believe that the regime in Iran heard the clear message from the Secretary General. I think the members of this body have forgotten the privilege and responsibility of sitting in this room. Secretary General, I know you hear me. I want to directly talk to you. Why are you afraid of the Islamic Republic? Millions of unarmed Iranians, innocent and unarmed protesters, have been silenced with bullets, mass arrest, prison, and a total communications blackout. No internet, no cell phones, and no landlines. They put Iran in a total darkness. I am here to bring their voices here in this room. I am here to tell you that a brutal slaughter has taken place in my beloved homeland, Iran, and it will get much worse if the world do not take serious action. Iran is facing a nationwide uprising that cuts across Iran, across the society, with a clear demand to end Islamic Republic. At the same time, a nationwide campaign by the Islamic Republic to erase it, to silence people. The protests start on December 28th, sparked by collapse of Iranian currency, but immediately turned into what Iranian people call it, a revolution, a total rejection against 47 years of tyranny and oppression. Protest spread to more than 100 cities and involved every layer of the societies: shopkeepers, workers, teachers, nurses, and those who wave the historic lion and sun flag, and those ethnic minorities, including Kurds, Baluch, all other minorities, men and women, shoulder to shoulder in the streets. When it comes to freeing Iran, I have to say that loud and clear, that all Iranians are united. From Tehran to Tabriz, to Rash to Ahvaz, from major cities to small towns and villages that we barely even heard the names of those small towns and villages in the media. They are in the street. Millions of Iranians flooded into the streets, demanding that their money stop being stolen and sending to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to Houthi, the money of the workers, the money of innocent people who do not have now the capability of to buy a bread. The entire nation looking at freedom right now. What followed was regime using military weapons, AK-47 against innocent people. According to Iran international media broadcasting, the death toll has passed more than 12,000. Just a day later, CBS reported more than 20,000 people have been killed, and they are not the numbers. They are not the statistics. We don't even know the real numbers. Citizen journalists from inside Iran have sent videos showing piles and piles of body bags on the top of each other. Iranians exile. Because of the internet shutdown, they zoom in to make sure whether their relatives and their beloved one are on the body bags or not. I myself have received urgent phone call and phone messages from Iranians, thanks to Starlink, inside the country, asking outside world for urgent help. They welcome when President Trump offered to rescue unarmed people being shot in their heart, in their chest by the security forces inside Iran. One activist who cannot be named for his safety told me, the streets are full of dead bodies. They are finishing off the injured in the street. They told me the security forces have stormed into hospitals and taking away the injured. I have also received multiple messages from families of victims who say the security forces forced them to pay money to take the dead body of their beloved one to bury them. On January 8, 2026, the Islamic Republic shut down the internet and imposed a technical blackout. Not to stop protests, because people are fed up and they are in the streets anywhere, but to hide their crimes, their brutality. This was not a technical mistake or failure. It was deliberate. When a regime turns off the internet during mass killings, and at the same time, the leaders of the same regime using the privilege of freedom of speech on social media to mislead the rest of the world, it is not about restoring order. It is about destroying the evidence. If it was not for Starling inside Iran, we couldn't have been able to have even these informations. The Islamic Republic does not limit its crimes within its own borders. They kill their opponents at home and target those who expose their brutality abroad. Here, even here, on US soil, and every corner of the world, in Europe, in Canada, in Australia, everywhere. And they are not alone. This is called transnational repression, and the Chinese government helping them, Venezuelan dictators are helping them, Russian mobsters being hired by the Islamic Republic to target their dissidents and opponents beyond their own borders. I now address the representative of the Islamic Republic directly. You have tried to kill me 3 times. I have seen my would-be assassin with my own eyes in front of my garden in my home in Brooklyn. In the United States of America, in the courthouse, I have seen my would-be assassin confessing that they have been hired by the Revolutionary Guards to end my life. My crime? Simply echoing the voice of innocent people that you killed them. Your leader, Ali Khamenei, he ordered my killing. He said that American agent who compared compulsory hijab to the Berlin Wall must be killed. I am that woman, and I am not the agent of America. I have agency, but I am thankful to American government and the law enforcement to protect my life. And it was not, if it was not the protection of the law enforcement, I couldn't have been here to testify for millions of people who are facing the same killers, facing the same terrorist regime in my country. Yes, protection matters. Unfortunately, I live with survivor's guilt because many Iranians do not have the same protection. The same IRGC with the same AK-47 killed them in front of the eyes of their family member. 2 would-be assassins received 25 years prison sentence here in New York, and I'm going to face 2 other killers being hired by the Islamic Republic in March, and they are the one who were assigned by the same IRGC member to assassinate President Trump. The Islamic Republic rules through fear. It makes people disappear from public life, from memory, from history. So today, I want to record the names of those who refuse to be afraid and erased. Setayesh Shafi'i, 20 years old. Before the internet was cut, she wrote on her social media, "They are cutting off my internet, but I love you all." She was killed by the Islamic Republic IRGC. Raybin Moradi, 17 years old, shot in the back, a young football player. He was killed by the same IRGC. Mehdi Zadparvar, a popular athlete. He wrote on his Instagram before going to the street, "I know I may be killed, but I have no fear. I want my rights." He was killed by the same IRGC. Siavash Shirzad, 30 years old. His family begged him not to go to the streets because of his safety. He said to his family, I go to the street to celebrate the victory of our revolution because President Trump promised to rescue our lives. He was killed by the same Revolutionary Guards. Negin Qadimi, 20 years old, she died in her father's arms after being shot by the Revolutionary Guards member. I feel guilty that I don't name the rest. The list of names goes on and on. They knew they will face guns and bullets, but they wanted justice. So now let me name their killers. Ali Khamenei, who declared protesters would be put in their place. Judiciary Chief Ghulam Hussein Mohseni Ejei and the IRGC commanders who publicly vowed punishment would be maximum. Ali Larijani, who promised no mercy for those who questioned the regime while his own daughter, his own family live here in the United States of America. They don't deserve to enjoy the privilege of freedom in America. Like the other children and relatives of the Ayatollah saying death to America, their relative live here in America. 3 years ago, another Iranian human rights defender stood here in this room to warn you about another nationwide protest, Women, Life, Freedom, after the murder of Mahsa Jina Amini for the crime of simply showing a bit of her hair. How many women are sitting here? You could easily get killed simply for showing your hair. Mahsa got killed. That sparked a revolution. And women and men shoulder to shoulder took to the street. More than 700 people got killed. We have seen this before. We have more names to remember. In 2009, Neda Agha Sultan, symbol of more than 100 people who got killed. They named President Obama to protect them. President Obama was looking to open the doors of diplomacy to a regime whose language of negotiating with its own people is guns and bullets. We've seen this in 2019 with Pouya Bakhtiari, who was killed in front of the eyes of his mother, Nahid Shirpishe. At the same time, President Biden was trying to keep the doors of diplomacy open, handing out billions of dollars to the regime that forced the family members to give money to the regime to take the dead body of their beloved one back. Faced with the regime using military weapons against civilians, the Iranian people are asking the world to help through actions, not back-to-back meetings and empty condemnation. We don't need empty words. People of Iran are asking the Islamic Republic, are telling you the Islamic Republic no longer can be reformed, and asking you that the Islamic Republic no longer be treated as a legitimate government. Today, the number of those killed is much higher than I told you. This regime, again and again, cannot be reformed. Let me be very clear. The Islamic Republic behave like ISIS, and the Islamic Republic must be treated like ISIS. This is how you can save lives. Thank you so much.
I thank Ms. Al-Najjad for the briefing. I now give the floor to Mr. Ahmed Batibi.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have a note here, but I don't want to read from this note. I want to talk from my heart here and share my experience with you when I was in the prison of Islamic Republic. My name is Ahmed Batibi, Iranian-American journalist and human rights activist. A few years ago, when I was a student, the Iranian regime arrested me and sent me to jail for attending a demonstration, exactly that thing we see in the street right now in Iran. And they said that demonstration against the government, Islamic regime in Iran, is fighting with the government, and we are representative of the God, of Allah on the earth. And when you fight with our regime, it means you fight with God. And based of the Islamic rule, Sharia, your punishment is death. They gave me capital punishment. They sent me jail. They kept me 2 years in solitary confinement. They tortured me, many torture, including fake execution. They killed other people and kept me there. I watched them, how they die to torture me. For 3 times they did that. They cut my body and put salt on my body. I can show you, if you do not believe me, I can show you my body right now to see the sign of these cuts. They torture mentally and physically for many reasons. One of the demand they had was bring me front of the camera of state TV to tell to people, I'm a spy of United States. They torture me. I go and say, I got money from the United States, Mossad, Israel, CIA, to run demonstration against the government. I never did that, but they torture me to do that. Exactly same situation we have in Iran right now. If you see the state TV, you see many innocent people. They came in the street, just chant their rights, and the Iranian regime put them in front of the camera, and they say that, yes, we are agent of this Mossad. And right now I'm here. After 1 decade of the prison, I had this chance to escape from the prison. And this country, the United States of America, opened the door in front of me. I come here, I'm safe here, and in front of you, gentlemen, representative of demonic regime in Iran, the Ayatollah's regime. When we are talking about Iranian regime, we do not talk about they have their own ideology. They have gun, they have money, and their mission is exporting their ideology to other countries. I don't want to talk about the details, but this is their mission. They have a technique. They have some chief apologists. Their job is coming here and clean the face of the regime, and they wash their bloody hand of the regime. But it doesn't work anymore. I'm here in front of you. You tried to kill me, but you couldn't. You cannot kill all the people. And don't laugh, sir, don't laugh at me, because a day come, we come top of your head, and you have to go court and answer for all those things you do here today, sir. Don't laugh at me. Don't laugh at me. 2 days ago, I was talking to someone who worked for government. He said that in the media, you see that they say 12,000 people died just during these days we have demonstration. That's correct. But the accurate number is much, much more than that, because the Iranian regime buried the people, the dead people, without any identification. They do not give chance to their family even go and get their body, and they bury them in unknown cemeteries. The number of dead people is much, much more than this. I was talking to an activist in Iran. He said that many of those people right now killing people in the street, they are Iranian regime proxy forces. Hashto Shabi from Iraq, Hezbollah from Lebanon, Fatimiyun or I don't know, Zainabiyun, they are Afghan people. He said that many of these people shoot us. They cannot even talk Farsi, and they talk Arabic with Iraqi accent. Everything I have to say details, Massey said that I don't want to get the time. But the only thing you have to know that, sir, you saw a lot of bravery during these days from Iranian people. But it's not enough. You cannot go fight with a demonic regime like Islamic Republic, which has gun, ammo, money, power, and everything. We need your help, not just condemning something or say that, no, it's bad, don't do it. We need actual act. We need physical act. I want to talk to the President of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump. I appreciate you, President. Everything you do is awesome. But during these days, you encourage people to go in the street. That was in need your help. You encourage them, and they are in the street. Please listen to them. They are chanting. They say what they want. They need your help. If you leave them alone, I'm talking about all official leaders of the world, we need your help. If you leave them alone, we cannot change the regime in Iran. And we continue this mass killing and genocide in Iran. Thank you so much.
I thank Mr. Batibi for the briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, for chairing today's important meeting. And thank you to our briefers, both of whom have been personally targeted for assassination, both of whom have been tortured at the hands of this brutal regime. Thank you for your courage, thank you for your strength, and for coming today to speak on behalf of the Iranian people. Colleagues, let me be clear. The level of violence, the level of repression that the Iranian regime has unleashed on its own citizens, its own people, has repercussions for international peace and security. You're going to hear today that it doesn't, that it's an internal matter. Absolutely wrong and false. This demands this Council's attention. The people of Iran are demanding their freedom like never before in the Islamic Republic's brutal history. Unarmed, peaceful people who love their country are taking to the streets in pursuit of their legitimate aspirations for a better future. Well, this is our message. President Donald J. Trump and the United States of America stands by the brave people of Iran, period. And regardless of its excuses, and you will hear many today from the Iranian regime and from its friends, the regime is solely responsible for the economic misery of the Iranian people and the repression of their freedom, and they will be held accountable. The estimates of the numbers of protesters killed by the regime so far range from the thousands to the tens of thousands. Although visibility into the totality of the violence has been obscured deliberately by the regime's nationwide internet. Why have the phone lines been cut? Why are commercial satellite communications being jammed in a very sophisticated manner? We've had a complete blackout. No internet, no phones, nothing. Only thanks to the Starlink system do we even have some window, a limited window, into the atrocities that are ongoing. Well, President Trump has been clear. He will not, nor should the international community, tolerate innocents being slaughtered in the streets. Since 1979, for decades, the regime has posed a threat to peace and security in the name of a religious ideology. The regime calls for death to America and the annihilation of Israel. Even as its own citizens cannot afford the very basics, food, drinking water, very basic medicines, it spends billions to develop its nuclear and ballistic missile programs to threaten its neighbors in the world and its support of terrorism. Well, from its inception, the regime has been the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, so declared year after year, bringing uncountable, death and suffering to innocents from Beirut all the way to Buenos Aires, while its rulers have become rich off of oppression and misery meted upon the Iranian people. The Iranian regime has also been a serial human rights abuser from its very first day in power. And as you heard today, young women like Mahsa Amini have been murdered for daring to uncover their hair in public. While religious minorities have been subjected to the most severe persecution, these abuses have been documented right here by this body, have been documented at length by the United Nations, have been documented by the Secretary General's own regular reports on the situation of human rights in Iran, the most recent of which was released just last year in 2025. Colleagues, in addition to the gross human rights abuses, in addition to its illegal march towards a nuclear weapon, in 1979, the regime we now know, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, gave support to radical students who attacked the United States Embassy in Tehran, took over 50 Americans hostage, and held them in captivity for over 400 days. That was followed by the bombing attack on the United States Embassy in Beirut, killing 17 Americans and scores of Lebanese civilians, followed by the supported and direction of terrorists who drove 2 trucks filled with explosives into U.S. and French barracks in Beirut, killing 241 American soldiers and 58 French military personnel, all part of a multinational force invited by the Lebanese government. It's responsible for the deaths of over 600 American service members and countless others in Iraq. Bottom line is Iran's partners and proxies with Iranian weaponry, documented by the United Nations Yemen panel of experts, have repeatedly attacked our partners in the Gulf and attempted to damage global energy infrastructure. And then finally, the Iranian regime, state television, amplifies calls for a, quote, one-bomb solution to wipe Israel off the map, which ironically would be not only a massacre of all Israelis, but also the Palestinian people whom the regime claims to support. In 2011, the regime attempted to assassinate the Saudi ambassador to the United States in Washington, D.C., but luckily the attempt was thwarted, and further, the regime has continued to plot assassination attempts against the President of the United States, against President Trump, and other senior U.S. government officials, in addition to those who dare speak out living here in the United States. Colleagues, Iran has destabilized the Middle East for decades. It has supported and enabled Hamas's brutality, its hostage-taking, its heinous October 7th attacks. It has funded Hezbollah. It has funded the Houthis. Iranian-aligned militia groups in Iraq, including Kataib Hezbollah, have attacked the United States and the region again and again. It's backed the brutal Assad regime, and at every turn, the regime has put terrorist proxies in other nations before the welfare of its own citizens. And as a result of the regime's actions, putting money in the pockets of terrorists, funding its nuclear and missile programs instead of the basic needs for the people of Iran, Iranians have had enough. The regime's dereliction of duty to its own citizens is what has put the Ayatollahs in the positions they are in today, with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, protesting in the streets after decades of neglect and abuse. So everyone should ask themselves, everyone sitting here today, how many people are dead? How many people are wounded, maimed, and abused in the Middle East, in Israel, in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, even Venezuela, because of the regime's support for terrorism as the largest state sponsor? And I would like to address the allegation put forward by the regime that these inspired protests are somehow a foreign plot to give a precursor to military action. Everyone in the world needs to know that the regime is weaker than ever before and therefore is putting forward this lie because of the power of the Iranian people in the streets. They are afraid. They're afraid of their own people. Iran says it's ready for dialogue, but its actions say otherwise. This is a regime that rules through oppression, through violence, and through intimidation, and has destabilized the Middle East for decades. Well, enough is enough. We all have a responsibility to support the Iranian people and to put an end to the regime's neglect and oppression of the Iranian nation. Colleagues, let me be clear. President Trump is a man of action, not endless talk like we see at the United Nations. He has made it clear all options are on the table to stop the slaughter. And no one should know that better than the leadership of the Iranian regime. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3 members, namely the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Somalia, and my own country, Liberia. The A3 thanks Assistant Secretary General for her comprehensive briefing, and we listened carefully to the remarks offered by civil society representatives. We welcome the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran to this meeting. Mr. President, we underscore the importance of respecting human rights, fundamental freedoms, and the legitimate aspirations of peaceful demonstrators, and call upon all parties to exercise maximum restraint and protect civilians. The A3 notes reports of ongoing protests and demonstrations across numerous cities and provinces involving a broad cross-section of the Iranian population, including youth, women, workers, and members of minority communities. The A3 is concerned by reports that the reaction to the protests and demonstrations has led to a significant number of deaths, arrests, and destruction of properties. Reports of the use of excessive force, including live ammunition and raids on hospitals, are alarming and unacceptable. We note the letter of the Iranian government circulated as a document of the Council, as well as the underlying socio-economic drivers of these protests, which include deteriorating economic and social conditions. The A3 recognizes that each country bears primary responsibility for addressing its internal issues through its own constitutional processes, other legal frameworks, and national institutions. However, we underscore the primacy of the Charter of the United Nations and relevant international obligations, and emphasize that the protection under all circumstances. The A3 believes that dialogue, inclusivity, and genuine engagement are essential tools for addressing tensions and grievances in a peaceful and sustainable manner in every society. Therefore, we encourage all actors in Iran to exercise maximum restraint and to seek peaceful, constructive, and inclusive dialogue with full respect for the rule of law, the rights of citizens, and the protection of civilians. Mr. President, the A3 emphasizes the necessity to respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iran and feels compelled to remind leaders of their obligations to their citizens, including the right to live in peace, security, and express themselves within the boundaries of the law. Separately but connected, the A3 takes note of the broader regional and international context in which these events are unfolding, including their intersection with long-standing issues related to the nuclear file and regional security dynamics, which underscores the risk of broader repercussions, a point made by the Assistant Secretary General. And so in this regard, the A3 reaffirms the central role of the global non-proliferation regime, including the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Transparency and sustained diplomatic engagement remain essential to building trust and reducing the risk of miscalculation. We encourage all concerned parties to refrain from rhetoric or actions that could escalate tensions, measures that support regional and international stability. To conclude, Mr. President, the A3 reiterates that all parties should exercise restraint and responsibility, uphold international law, and avoid any action that could escalate tension and threaten regional stability. The A3 stands ready to support all efforts geared toward accountability, including within this Council, and in cooperation with regional partners, intend to facilitate a peaceful, inclusive, and lasting resolution in the Islamic Republic of Iran. And we thank you.
I thank the representative of Liberia for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, since the end of December, the whole world has been watching as the United States continues to escalate tensions and fuel hysteria around Iran, declaring that help is already on the way. What's more, in its official statements, Washington has not even tried to cover up the genuine reasons for its alleged concern over the country's internal political situation as it threatens new strikes against Iran. Today's meeting convened by our American colleagues, is nothing more than yet another attempt to justify blatant aggression and interference in the internal affairs of a sovereign state. And if, as Washington puts it, Iran's authorities do not come to their senses, then Washington will solve the Iranian problem in its favorite way through strikes aimed at overthrowing an undesirable regime. To lend credibility to their actions and to justify them, they have invited today's briefers, individuals who have been living in the United States for some 20 years and promoting an anti-Iranian agenda in Washington's interests. These so-called briefers cannot speak on behalf of the Iranian people. We firmly reject any attempts by the U.S. to waste council members' valuable time on briefings that are meant only to serve the interests and the position of those who convened this meeting, and briefings that are in no way related to issues of international peace and security. What just took place overall was nothing more than a circus, an embarrassment, a cheap show that is unbefitting of members of the Council. Mr. President, we have carefully studied the letters circulated in the Security Council in recent days from the Iranian mission. We express our solidarity with the people of Iran and mourn all innocent victims. We see that hostile external forces are attempting to exploit the current situation in order to overthrow a government they find objectionable and destroy the Islamic Republic of Iran as a sovereign and independent state. At the same time, we note that the authorities in Tehran have declared and reaffirmed their commitment to their international obligations, including respect for human rights and ensuring conditions for the peaceful expression of public opinion, while at the same time fulfilling their inherent duty to protect citizens' lives, public order, and the country's territorial integrity. As far as we can tell, the protest momentum has begun to subside and the situation is gradually normalizing. The government of Iran has taken the necessary steps to stabilize the economic situation and has established a constructive dialogue with the public in order to address any emerging issues. Mass rallies have taken place in the Islamic Republic of Iran in support of the country's supreme leader and its independent course. The Russian Federation is convinced that today's meeting of the Council should be approached through the lens of its mandate to maintain international peace and security and uphold international law, and not through the lens of Iran's internal political affairs. Violations of the aforementioned norms and principles in the current situation are obvious. They include the extremely dangerous and irresponsible rhetoric employed in recent days by U.S. leadership, which has gone as far as openly calling for the takeover of state institutions in Iran and threats to assist the protesters. Such statements amount to nothing other than incitement to violently overthrow the constitutional order of a sovereign state. They are a gross violation of paragraphs 4 and 7 of Article 2 of the UN Charter, which prohibit the threat or use of force and establish the principle of non-interference in the domestic affairs of states. Mr. President, what is happening on the streets of Iran in recent days has gone far beyond peaceful protest. There have been documented cases of firearms use, killings of law enforcement officers as well as civilians, arson attacks on medical facilities and public institutions, as well as attacks on emergency. Not be covered up by the pretext of freedom of expression or protecting human rights. What is happening in Iran is yet another example of the use of tried and tested methods for a color revolution in which specially trained armed provocateurs transform peaceful protests into senseless violence, riots, destruction of public property, and brutal killings of police officers, state security personnel, and peaceful protesters, including children. As we have already seen repeatedly in a number of states, all these actions are either directed or supported by external forces that are interested in a so-called regime change. In the present situation, these external forces are not even bothering to conceal their involvement in violent actions, especially given that the President of the United States has openly called on protesters to take over Iranian state institutions. The U.S. and its cheerleaders are actively exploiting the economic and social difficulties faced by ordinary Iranians, difficulties caused by unlawful sanctions pressure imposed on Iran by Western states. They're using this to inflame public tensions and destabilize the domestic political situation. The current situation is clearly in line with Washington's declared policy, one supported by its allies, of maximum pressure on Tehran in order to advance their own political interests in the Middle East. They are using every means available to achieve this. And this includes not only unlawful unilateral sanctions imposed in circumvention of the Security Council and in blatant violation of the UN Charter, but also unceremonious blackmail of other states by increases in trade tariffs. Our Western colleagues are not above using the Security Council as a tool to promote their delusional agenda. A striking example of this is the attempt by the UK, France, and Germany to create the illusion of reinstating anti-Iranian Security Council resolutions through the purported triggering of the snapback mechanism envisioned in Resolution 2231 of the Security Council. Their justification for this relied on Western states' fabrications about some sort of threat to international peace and security posed by Iran's peaceful nuclear program. And this is despite the fact that the IAEA Director General has never reached such conclusions in his reports on the matter, nor found evidence of diversion of nuclear material to military purposes. And the entire crisis of Washington's unilateral withdrawal from the nuclear deal in 2018. Nevertheless, the EU3 continues to promote its baseless narrative and deepen divisions within the Security Council. What is most concerning is Washington's aggressive course towards the use of military force and threats of its use against Iran. We condemn such actions, no matter what arguments are used to justify them, as a gross violation of international law and the UN Charter. We strongly urge the hotheads in Washington and other capitals who seem to be contemplating a repeat military venture to come to their senses and avoid a repetition of the tragedy of June 2025, when U.S.-Israeli aggression nearly resulted in a major nuclear catastrophe with inevitable humanitarian and environmental consequences. We demand that the United States and its like-minded partners refrain from further reckless steps, including those involving nuclear facilities. They should rather focus on providing solid assurances against further confrontation and resume joint efforts to find potential solutions. This includes addressing unfounded concerns regarding Iran's peaceful nuclear program. All of this should be done on the basis of international law and seeking a balance of all stakeholders' interests. Our country stands ready to assist this in every possible way. Mr. President, the Russian Federation decisively condemns all forms of external interference, incitement to violence, and threats of use of force against the friendly nation of Iran. We call on the conveners of today's meeting to stop making themselves out to be a global judge and put an end to their escalatory actions. Your actions risk plunging the region into even bloodier chaos that could easily spill beyond its borders. And a separate appeal to our colleagues on the Council and all UN member states. We call on them to prevent a new large-scale escalation and ensure that the Security Council is not used to justify unlawful regime change scenarios or to name and shame the legitimate authorities of a sovereign state. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Mr. President, I would like to thank Assistant Secretary General for Africa, Ms. Martha Pebi, for her briefing, as well as Ms. Ali Nejad and Mr. Batebi for their testimonies today. Mr. President, Greece is following developments in Iran with deep concern. The continued escalation of violence and the use of force against protesters, the loss of human life, among them children, and the widespread arrest are utterly condemnable. Fundamental rights, including the inherent right to life, the freedom of expression, and the freedom of assembly, are universal rights and must be fully respected by all without discrimination or exception. Any form of violent repression is unacceptable, and this all the more true when it results in the loss of life. Violence of this kind must be absolutely condemned. The use of force against individuals exercising fundamental rights can never be justified and must always be unequivocally rejected. The death penalty imposed merely as a result of them exercising a fundamental right constitutes an affront to justice. Such unjust actions gravely undermine respect for human dignity and fundamental rights. It is very important that no sentences be carried out against those demonstrating in favor of freedom. Mr. President, colleagues, at the same time, Greece recalls that full respect for international law and for the Charter of the United Nations remains paramount. Current developments on the ground, no matter how dire, should not lead to a further escalation. No matter how difficult, dialogue remains the only viable path forward for the rights and the prosperity of the Iranian people. Greece firmly believes that this is the only way to address legitimate social grievances, prevent further violence, and avert the risk of a wider regional conflagration. In closing, Mr. President, Greece reiterates its belief in the need of de-escalation, dialogue, and the peaceful resolution of the current crisis, in full conformity with the Charter of the United Nations and international law. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. We wish to thank the ASG for Africa from the Department of Political and Peace Building Affairs and Peace Operations, Ms. Marta Pobe, for her detailed presentation. We also thank Mr. Ahmad Batevi and Ms. Masi Alinajed for their briefings. Moreover, we recognize the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran and their delegation. The Republic of Panama and the people's protests that have been unfolding in the Islamic Republic of Iran. These events lay bare the widespread discontent of the civilian population. The protests were originally peaceful, despite the fact that ultimately they were repressed with violence. These events have been met with a disproportionate response from the Iranian authorities. The authorities are looking at stifling citizens' freedom of expression due to cuts to communication blackouts across the country. It is difficult to objectively verify the facts. As such, there is little accurate information available regarding the current state of affairs. We cannot confirm the information that is circulating. However, thanks to the work of several independent media outlets, that of non-governmental organizations and that of brave Iranians, concerning figures have emerged. According to these reports, to date, the number of fatalities could stand at 2,000 or more, and a considerable number of people have been wounded or detained. Against this backdrop, concerns begin to arise, legitimate concerns indeed, at the possibility that the government may use summary trials and executions against those detained during national protests. With this in mind, Panama rejects any type of execution where the accused has not been offered the right to defence and due process in accordance with international law. These guarantees can never be selectively applied, nor can they be applied with double standards. Many detainees could meet such a fate, this in flagrant violation of all due process and of the fundamental rights protected by international law and enshrined in the UN Charter. President, rights to the freedom of expression, association and peaceful assembly, as enshrined in international law, must be fully respected and protected by all states. Recent protests are the consequence of the wearing down of a regime which is economically and socially exhausted. They are also the consequence of the actions of the regime itself, lives of Iranians, and have specifically affected Iranian women and children. The regime has prevented their education, their participation in public life, and their autonomy. Episodes in recent years have already laid bare the fact that there is a need to guarantee women's legitimate right to exercise their fundamental rights in a safe and dignified fashion. However, it is indeed timely to recognize that the economic isolation imposed by the international community may have also contributed to a certain extent to the fraying of Iran's social fabric, and that has directly affected the civilian population and exacerbated internal tensions. Consequently, we appeal to all actors to constructively provide support. All must also avoid imposing additional pressures which could further worsen the situation. It is of the utmost importance that the international community act with a sense of great responsibility and that it exercise caution. It must endeavour not to create adverse effects through their actions which could have unpredictable consequences and further burden the already heavily tested Iranian population or serve to escalate tensions. This will see us ensure that the cure administered is not worse than the original illness. We urge the Iranian authorities to immediately put an end to and avoid all violent or disproportionate actions against the civilian population. The Iranian authorities must urgently facilitate a constructive forum for peaceful dialogue. Moreover, we encourage measures which guarantee access to information and communications, including the restoration of services that have been interrupted. This is because transparency is a fundamental prerequisite to generate trust and to prevent a further escalation of tensions. It is vital that human rights be respected. Citizens' safety and security must be guaranteed, and the legitimate demands of society must be heeded if we are to restore stability in the country. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
President, I thank Assistant Secretary General Martha Poby for her briefing on behalf of the Secretariat. Patents as regards the briefings by a civil society for an informed discussion. And needless to re-emphasize here the respect for decorum of this Council. President, we have been carefully observing developments in Iran and the region in recent days. New threats to regional peace and stability are emerging at a time of heightened tensions and thus remain a serious cause of concern. Iran is an immediate neighbor of Pakistan and a brotherly country. The people of our two nations share deep-rooted historical, friendly, cultural, and religious bonds. We hope for an early normalization of the situation in Iran and express support for all diplomatic efforts aimed at regional peace and stability. A stable and peaceful Iran is in the interests of Pakistan the region, and beyond. We have full confidence in the wisdom of the Iranian people and leadership rooted in their rich culture, ancient civilization, history, and resilience to address all challenges. President, the fundamental principles and objectives of the United Nations Charter are inviolable and sacrosanct. The UN Charter prohibits threat or use of force against other states' territorial integrity or independence, or to interfere in matters essentially within the domestic jurisdiction of states. Any external interference in the domestic affairs of states is inconsistent with international law and principles of the UN Charter. We strongly believe that all disputes must be resolved through peaceful means and in accordance with international law. Continued hostilities, use of force, and unilateral actions will only take us further away from the resolution of core issues and cause unnecessary humanitarian suffering. The threat or use of force would only aggravate the situation and undermine regional and international peace and stability. All parties must exercise restraint, act responsibly, strictly stay within the bounds of international law, and eschew any action that will be detrimental to regional and international peace and security. Diplomacy and dialogue should be the guiding principles for achieving negotiated settlement of all contentious issues in accordance with the rights, obligations, and responsibilities of the parties concerned. Pakistan has consistently advocated the primacy of diplomatic engagement and the imperative of avoiding confrontation and conflict in a region already beset by tensions and volatility. We sincerely hope that the situation in Iran will soon return to calm and normalcy, free from any internal turmoil or external pressure, and all relevant parties will return to the negotiating table to find a lasting solution to their differences based on mutual respect and understanding. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I thank ASG Poby for her briefing and welcome the participation of the representative of Iran at today's meeting. China and Russia have made their position clear to all council members regarding the United States invitation of the relevant briefers. Recent developments in Iran have drawn widespread attention. China has taken note of the description thereof provided by the Iranian Foreign Minister in his letter to the UN Secretary General. For some time now, the United States has continued to make statements on the situation in Iran and has openly issued threats of the use of force against Iran. As a result, clouds of war are gathering over the Middle East and the tensions in the region continue to escalate. China has always advocated adherence to the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and international law. We oppose the use or threat of force in international relations, oppose imposing one's will upon other countries, and oppose any regression of the world to the law of the jungle. Sovereign equality and non-interference in internal affairs are basic principles of international law and the most fundamental norms governing modern international relations. Iran is an independent sovereign state. Iran's affairs should be decided independently by the Iranian people. China supports safeguarding Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity, and calls on the international community to support the Iranian government and people in overcoming current difficulties and in maintaining national security and social stability. The use of force can never solve problems. It will only make them more complex and intractable. Any military adventurism would only push the region toward an unpredictable abyss. We urge the United States to abide by the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, abandon its fixation on the use of force, and call on all parties to exercise restraint and work together. At present, the Middle East remains the most fragile region in the global security landscape, with the risks of turmoil and conflict persistently high. The people of the region have a strong desire for peace and development. China has noted the grave concerns expressed by the vast majority of regional countries regarding military confrontation, as well as their sincere expectation for resolving disputes peacefully through dialogue. China hopes that the United States and other relevant parties will take seriously the voices of the international community and regional countries and do more for peace and stability in the Middle East, rather than the opposite. All countries should play a constructive role in promoting peace and ending conflicts, avoid exacerbating tensions, and refrain from adding fuel to the fire. President, peace and development are the shared aspirations of all peoples. History has repeatedly proven that an obsession with force, relentless pressure, and wanton interference only generate more conflict and hatred. No country has the power to dictate the future of another, and no action that defies international law can be tolerated. We call on the international community to stand on the right side of history and on the side of fairness and justice, and work tirelessly for peace and stability in the Middle East and peace and tranquility in the world. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
Thank you, President. The Kingdom of Bahrain is closely following developments in the Islamic Republic of Iran. We are following these developments closely and calmly. We call on the Iranian authorities to exercise restraint and to avert any escalation that can lead to losses in lives or destruction. This will have negative repercussions for security and stability in the region. We mourn and express our condolences to the families of those affected by these incidents and developments. In light of these developments, the Kingdom of Bahrain reiterates that the primary responsibility for promoting and protecting human rights lies and rests with the state in accordance with its international law obligations, including the treaties and international norms and standards that are relevant. In addition, the Kingdom of Bahrain reiterates that it's important to preserve the higher interests of the Iranian people. Their expectations, their aspirations must be met in order to achieve security and stability in the region. In conclusion, Mr. President, we remain committed to promoting peace and stability regionally and internationally. At the same time, we reiterate that we must refrain from any action that could have broader regional implications. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Assistant Secretary General Pobi, Masih Alinejad, and Ahmad Batebi. We welcome this timely meeting. The United Kingdom is appalled by the reports that potentially thousands of people in Iran have been killed and many more arrested in the most brutal repression of public protests in decades. Despite the regime's near-total internet shutdown, videos emerging from Iran indicate that reports may underestimate the full scale of horror currently underway. The regime will claim that these protests were instigated by foreign-backed forces, but lies and propaganda cannot justify its actions. This behavior is not an aberration for this regime. It is the latest manifestation of the repression and brutality we have witnessed time and time again. Let me be clear. We condemn the regime's actions in the strongest possible terms. We pay tribute to the courage of the Iranian people, particularly Iranian women. Once again, they are bravely voicing their aspirations to live in freedom and dignity in the face of repression and violence. As my Prime Minister stated, alongside his French and German counterparts, we urge Iran to respect the fundamental rights and freedoms of its people, including the right to protest without fear of violence or repression. Iranian authorities must protect their people, not brutalize them. Iran must urgently change course. We have delivered this message directly to Foreign Minister Araghchi. As the G7 has made clear, we will act alongside our partners to impose additional restrictive measures if it does not. As my Foreign Secretary has said, the world is watching. The United Kingdom will continue to confront the regime's misinformation, call out its repression, and support regional peace and security. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you to the Somali presidency for acting swiftly to convene this meeting. The gravity of the situation in Iran warrants this timely discussion. I'd also like to thank Assistant Secretary General Pobi for her briefing and the civil society briefers, Mrs. Aline Majad and Mr. Batebi, for sharing their insights and personal experiences. Mr. President, once again, the Iranian people have taken to the streets to bravely voice their demands for a better life, a life in freedom, dignity, and prosperity. And once again, they have been met with sheer brutality and ferocious violence. We're deeply concerned by the reports of several thousand protesters killed by the Iranian security forces. And as we've heard from Assistant Secretary General Pobi, more than 18,000 arrested. Iran's brutal crackdown on the protesters is unacceptable. We strongly condemn these killings, as well as the use of violence, arbitrary detention, and intimidation tactics by the security forces against the protesters. These actions must stop. All Iranians must be able to express their grievances peacefully and without fear. We urge the Iranian authorities to exercise maximum restraint from unnecessary and disproportionate use of force. We stand in full solidarity with the Iranian people while they exercise their rights to freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly. We call on Iran to comply with its obligations under international human rights law and to ensure unhindered access to information and communication, including access to the internet for all Iranians. Mr. President, loud and clear, again and again, we hear the Iranians lift their voices for a better life, for their lives, for their rights to be respected. For too long, the leaders in Tehran have not heeded this call. The time has now come for the government of Iran to finally listen, to respond to the will of its people through peaceful means. We urge them to start today. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Gracias, señor. Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this briefing. I wish to convey my gratitude to Assistant Secretary General for Africa. I also thank the briefers for their statements. Mr. President, Colombia reaffirms, as it has done historically within this organization, and as it has also done since its very first day as an elected member on this council, we reaffirm that our position will always be guided by international law and the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter, as well as by a commitment to peace, the peaceful resolution of disputes, the respect for sovereignty, and the non-interference in internal affairs of states, as well as by the need for the respect for human rights, which are applicable in all contexts without exception. The freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association are universal rights. They are enshrined in international human rights law, and that law must apply without exception. It cannot be watered down or relativized. These freedoms must be guaranteed throughout the world. No differentiated treatment can be applied, and the above is a vital prerequisite for legitimacy, peace, and democracy. The systematic nature of repression, criminalization, and censorship as a response to the free exercise of the right to protest are unjustifiable in any circumstance. Moreover, they constitute grave violations of human rights, and they weaken the very foundations of the rule of law. Against that backdrop, we are gravely concerned by the events which are unfolding in Iran. including the use of the death penalty and other forms of repression as a response to peaceful demonstrations. We are also alarmed by the use of expedited legal proceedings, which do not guarantee due process. This is in flagrant contradiction with international obligations. Moreover, we are concerned by censorship and restrictions on information. Consequently, in our view, the safe access of international press and the restoration of the internet must be guaranteed immediately. The human rights situation of women in Iran continues to be a source of alarm. We are particularly concerned by the disproportionate impact that repression against protest may have on women. Moreover, women have played a pivotal role and indeed a leading role in these protests. We fervently appeal to all member states to respect, protect, guarantee, and enforce human rights for all people. We underscore the need to guarantee accountability in all cases. This in order to prevent impunity and to guarantee access to justice and reparation for victims. Mr. President, it is of paramount importance to mitigate tensions and to avoid actions which may fan the flames of confrontation. Moreover, my country emphasizes the need for restraint. Any rhetoric or action which aims to escalate the situation, including the threat of the unilateral use of force, brings with it grave risks for stability, to the stability in a region already marked by a high degree of volatility. Such actions could also imperil international peace and security. To conclude, my country insists that it is only inclusive dialogue, a dialogue which involves all strata of Iranian society, that can offer a sustainable solution. Lasting solutions cannot be imposed through force. Rather, these solutions are built through peaceful, participatory, and nationally led processes. In view of the grave nature of the situation, it is incumbent upon this Council to keep their eyes trained on events and to guarantee the protection of civilians, the full respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and accountability for violations perpetrated. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Colombia for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, President. Let me thank Assistant Secretary General Pobe for today's briefing. And I would like to thank Ms. Alinejad and Mr. Batebi for sharing their very personal and courageous testimonies. The Islamic Republic of Iran has once again launched a war against its own people. It is killing innocent Iranians. As we sit here today, hundreds of thousands of brave Iranians, exhausted by repression and economic deprivation, are standing for their freedom. On the streets across the country, they demand basic rights and human dignity. And these demands are met with brutality, violence, and censorship by the regime. The failing Iranian regime is trying to hide its crimes behind the total telecom and internet blackout, but it is not possible to hide the truth. Iran's state forces are killing protesters by the thousands. They are arresting and torturing Iranians destabilizing role across the Middle East and beyond. It continues to pursue its illegal nuclear program. It has persistently avoided re-establishing credible, verifiable cooperation with the IAEA. The regime has supported, financed, and armed various proxy forces and terrorist groups, including Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, This has gravely undermined regional security and prosperity. The continued material support of the Iranian regime to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is despicable. Iranian weapons and technology are used to destroy also Ukrainian cities and commit atrocities against the Ukrainian people. Because Iran has chosen to supply and support the aggressors, while its own people have been driven to despair. Mr. President, for far too long, the Iranian regime has posed an unacceptable threat to global peace and security, and we condemn in the strongest possible terms the brutal actions of the regime and reiterate our support to the brave Iranian people. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of France, of Latvia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie Madame la sous-secrétaire générale, Marta Pobi, ainsi que Madame Massi Alinejad et Monsieur Ahmad Batebi pour leurs exposés. Nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui pour évoquer la situation en Iran et les présentations qui viennent d'être faites nous ont dépeint l'extrême gravité de ce qui est en train de s'y passer sous nos yeux. Depuis le 28 décembre dernier, une intolérable violence d'État s'abat sur les manifestants qui se sont mobilisés à travers l'Iran pour exprimer de façon pacifique leurs aspirations légitimes à la dignité, à la liberté, au respect de leurs droits fondamentaux. Les victimes innocentes de cette répression se comptent désormais en milliers. Déjà, en 2009, en 2019, en 2022, les autorités iraniennes avaient réprimé dans le sang les mouvements pacifiques de la population iranienne, soulevés pour leur dignité et pour leurs droits. Nous conservons le souvenir de la mort de Mahsa Amini en septembre 2022 aux mains de la police des mœurs iranienne. La France condamne le recours massif et délibéré à la violence par les forces de sécurité iraniennes. Elle condamne les détentions arbitraires de milliers de manifestants. Elle condamne les coupures d'Internet dans l'ensemble du pays qui visent à imposer le silence sur la brutalité de la répression. La France exprime sa solidarité avec les victimes. Elle se tient aux côtés du peuple iranien qui manifeste pacifiquement pour ses droits et pour sa liberté. Nous exhortons les autorités iraniennes à se conformer à leurs obligations internationales et à respecter les droits et libertés fondamentales du peuple iranien, en particulier la liberté d'expression, le droit à l'information, la liberté de réunion pacifique. Le président de la République française, M. Emmanuel Macron, s'est exprimé en ce sens. Le ministre français des Affaires étrangères l'a dit sans détour à son homologue iranien, et l'ambassadeur d'Iran à Paris se l'est vu signifier dans les termes les plus clairs lorsqu'il a été convoqué il y a 2 jours au ministère des Affaires étrangères. Nous réitérons également notre appel à la libération immédiate et inconditionnelle de tous les prisonniers arbitrairement détenus en Iran, ainsi qu'à la suspension de l'application de la peine de mort. Nous demandons la convocation rapide d'une session extraordinaire du Conseil des droits de l'homme afin d'évoquer la situation en Iran et de charger les mécanismes dédiés d'enquêter sur les violations des droits de l'homme. Monsieur le Président, face à l'ampleur et à la brutalité de la répression, la communauté internationale et le Conseil de sécurité ne peuvent détourner le regard. Il appartient au peuple iranien et à lui seul de décider de son destin. Mais notre responsabilité collective est de dénoncer les violences et la répression dont il est victime alors qu'il exprime ses aspirations légitimes. Comme l'a rappelé le président de la République, le respect des libertés fondamentales est une exigence universelle. La dénégation brutale de cette exigence par les autorités iraniennes constitue tout ensemble une violation des responsabilités de l'État à l'égard de sa population et un facteur supplémentaire de menace à la paix et à la sécurité internationale. La vigilance de ce Conseil est d'autant plus justifiée que la situation présente un risque d'escalade très préoccupant. Que l'Iran, nous le savons, continue par ailleurs de mettre en péril la sécurité régionale par le soutien qu'il apporte aux groupes armés non étatiques qui lui sont affiliés, et qu'il continue de défier le régime international de non-prolifération en poursuivant un programme balistique menaçant ainsi qu'un programme nucléaire dont les finalités pacifiques ne peuvent pas être démontrées par l'Agence internationale de l'énergie atomique. Monsieur le Président, avec ses partenaires européens et du G7, la France est prête à imposer des mesures restrictives supplémentaires à l'encontre des individus et entités impliqués dans la répression des manifestations en Iran. La France appelle ce Conseil à ne pas détourner les yeux de ce qui se passe en Iran. Elle appelle tous ses membres à enjoindre les autorités iraniennes de répondre aux aspirations légitimes de leur population et de mettre un terme à la violence et à la répression sanglante exercée contre les manifestants. Je vous remercie.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Islamic Republic of Iran.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Mr. President, let me state from the outset our firm objection to the participation of the so-called representatives of civil society. I must be absolutely clear. Both briefers imposed by the representative of the United States regime under this false label do not represent Iran's civil society. They represent the political agenda of the United States and Israeli regimes. They have lived outside Iran for more than 2 decades and have consistently engaged in incitement to violence and promotion of extremist and terrorist activities, including advocating and facilitating the use of lethal force against law enforcement officers. Their presence here is therefore neither legitimate nor credible, and it fundamentally undermines the integrity of this discussion. It is shameful that the United States regime transferred this esteemed body to a scene for theater and show, for baseless accusation and statement. This is in line with the United States regime in dismantling and disgracing the United Nations system. If you want to look for a case, the killing of innocent lady in Minnesota last week and nationwide crackdown can be brought here with the testimony and with the briefers. And please teach them the meaning of briefing. The briefing is different from the personal statement and accusation. Please do not sell them to the world as representatives of Iran's civil society. Their acts and statements regarding Iran are far from civil, and they have long divorced from Iran's society. They amplify the Israeli-American foreign agenda. They are both on Mossad's payroll in accordance with undeniable evidence. We have taken note of the briefing provided by ASG. Regrettably, her briefing was one-sided and not grounded in factual evidence. Mr. President, I wish to extend my deepest condolences and sympathy with a heavy and grieving heart to the brave people of my country and to the families of many victims. In recent weeks, Iran has lost numerous innocent civilians and devoted members of its security and law enforcement forces. Many of our young people were brutally murdered in acts of extreme violence resulting from the atrocities committed by ISIS. Many of our police officers sacrificed their lives in the line of duty to protect civilians and preserve public order. I speak today on behalf of a nation in mourning. It is deeply regrettable that the representative of the United States regime who requested this meeting has today resorted to lies, distortion of facts, and deliberate misinformation to conceal his country's direct involvement in steering unrest in Iran to violence. In fact, the United States request for this meeting is shameful to conceal their direct complicity in the crime their mercenaries have committed against our nations from 8 to 10 January. As part of Israel's malicious attempt to drag America into another war of aggression against Iran. Under the hollow pretext of concern for the Iranian people and claims of support for human rights, the United States regime is attempting to portray itself as a friend of the Iranian people, while simultaneously laying the groundwork for political destabilization and military intervention under a so-called humanitarian narrative. These claims are particularly cynical when viewed against the United States regime long and well-documented record of unlawful military interventions, regime change operations, and systematic violations of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. Across the world, these policies have led to mass civilian casualties, the collapse of states, prolonged humanitarian disasters, and the emergence and empowerment of extremist and terrorist groups. This is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of historical record and fact. The Iranian people for decades have experienced the true meaning of the so-called support. The United States pattern of coercion and interference under the deceptive pretext is clear, from the orchestration of the 1956 coup against the democratically elected government of Dr. Mossadegh to its extensive political, military, and intelligence backing of Saddam's regime war of aggression against Iran. From the downing of Iran Air Flight 655 in 1988, killing 290 innocent civilians, to its complicity in assassinations, sabotage, and attacks against Iranian civilian and infrastructure, including the war of aggression carried out in June 2025, and from decades of unlawful unilateral sanctions to systematic economic coercion. These measures have gravely violated the Iranian people's fundamental rights, including their inherent rights of life, health, and development. Unfortunately, several Western members of this Council, including France and United Kingdom regimes, have once again adopted their familiar double standards, while claiming to champion human rights and to support the Iranian people, they have, alongside the United States regime, imposed some of the most severe and unlawful sanctions in modern history. Sanctions that have inflicted widespread suffering on civilians. At the same time, they have failed to condemn, let alone sanction, the Israeli regime for its acts of genocide and crimes against humanity. Mr. President, between 8 and 10 January 26, the people and government of the Islamic Republic of Iran were confronted with ISIS-style acts of terrorism and extreme violence across the country. Peaceful protests that began on 28 December 2025 with legitimate economic demands were deliberately hijacked by organized armed groups and transformed into violent riots. Documented cases include beheading, people being burned alive, police officers and ordinary citizens beaten to death, widespread use of firearms, and the deliberate torching of ambulances, fire engines, health facilities, residential buildings, and places of worship. These were not isolated incidents. They reflect a clear and systematic pattern of organized violence. A significant number of police officers were killed or severely injured. These heavy casualties demonstrate the extreme brutality of terrorist elements. The situation is, in fact, very simple. The United States regime and its accomplices, particularly the Israeli regime, cannot evade responsibility for the innocent blood that has been shed in my country. Unable to achieve their objectives through the 12-day war of aggression against Iran in June 2025, they have now sought to pursue the same goals through political destabilization, internal unrest, and chaos. This strategy relies on manufacturing casualties, spreading false and inflated figures, and creating a pretext for foreign intervention. It is a familiar script, one that has been used repeatedly from Iraq to Libya and to Venezuela. Mr. President, allow me to recall only a few of interventionist and reckless statements made by US officials, which clearly demonstrates Washington's direct involvement in this unrest. On 29 December 2025, during a joint press conference with the Prime Minister of Israel regime, the President of the United States regime declared, if Iran continues with its missile program, yes, I support a strike. If they continue with their nuclear program, the strike should be immediate. He further threatened, we are going to have to knock them down. We'll knock them down. We'll knock the hell out of them. On 2nd January, former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo openly acknowledged the presence of Mossad agents among the rioters. I quote the same wording he used in his message in X. Happy New Year to every Iranian in the street, also to every Mossad agent beside them. End of the quote. On 3rd January 2026, the President of the United States regime stated, we are locked and loaded and ready to go. On 10 January 2026, Senator Lindsey Graham publicly incited violence action, stating when President Trump says, "Make Iran great again," it means protesters in Iran should defeat the Ayatollah. On 12 January, the White House spokesperson confirmed that President Trump would not be hesitant to use military force against Iran. On the same day, Senator Graham declared, I quote, "Iran's leadership must be destroyed. This is the best opportunity since 1779 to change the Middle East." On 13 January, the US President stated, and I quote, "Iranian patriots, keep protesting. Take over your institutions. Help is on its way." And the statement of the representative of the United States regime today will be added to this list. These are not isolated remarks. They constitute explicit calls for regime change, violence, and military aggression. Mr. President, the exploitation of peaceful protest for geopolitical purposes and reckless endangerment of civilian lives fully aligned with the destructive role and unlawful unilateral sanctions have played in creating this situation. Claims of concern for human rights ring hollow when made by those who systematically violated them. 3 days ago, millions of Iranians marched to restore calm in our cities, to support law and order, and to reject reckless attempts to push our country towards civilian conflicts. President Trump chose to ignore this historic display of unity and restraint. Instead, he issued a provocative statement aimed at reinvigorating unrest. But people of Iran, nationwide, ignored his invitation for further violence, and this is why calm has been reestablished across the country. Mr. President, any threat to use of force against the Islamic Republic of Iran under any pretext, including claims of protecting protesters or supporting the Iranian people, constitute a grave and manifest violation of international law and the UN Charter. Such unlawful actions directly breach Article 2.4, which prohibits the threat or use of force, and Article 2.7, which enshrines the principle of non-intervention. No rule of doctrine, narrative, or political justification can legitimize unilateral military action or coercion without explicit Security Council authorization under Chapter 7. Invoking humanitarian rhetoric to justify force in a deliberate abuse of international law. The Security Council, its members, and the Secretary General bear a clear legal, moral, and political responsibility to unequivocally reject and condemn such unlawful actions before it is too late. The credibility of the United Nations and the survival of the Charter itself now depend on whether this fundamental prohibition is upheld or eroded by one of its own permanent members. Mr. President, Iran seeks neither escalation nor confrontation. However, any act of aggression, direct or indirect, will be met with a decisive, proportionate, and lawful response under Article 51 of the Charter. This is not a threat. It is a statement of legal reality. Responsibility for all consequences will rest solely with those who initiate such unlawful acts. Mr. President, the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran remains fully committed to its human rights obligations, including the right to peaceful protest. It has exercised maximum restraint while fulfilling its duty to protect its people and preserve public order. However, the incitement to violence, encouragement of internal destabilization, and explicit threat of military action against a sovereign member states constitute a threat to international peace and security within the meaning of Article 39 of the Charter. In conclusion, Mr. President, we categorically reject all politically motivated accusations made today against my government. The facts on the ground contradict the fabricated narratives presented by the United States regime and its allies at this meeting. U.S. fabrications of the senseless killing of protesters neither reflects reality on the ground, nor would it whitewash Americans' crimes against the great people of Iran. The allegation that the government of the Islamic of Iran has killed peaceful protesters is quite distortion of the facts on the ground. What the Iranian security forces did confront firmly and responsibly were armed ISIS-style terrorist cells and violent separatist groups funded and armed by a few foreign entities, including the Israeli regime. These groups deliberately targeted civilians and law enforcement officers in an attempt to ignite civil war and create the conditions for foreign intervention. The claim that internet restrictions were imposed to conceal harm to our own people is equally false. On the contrary, temporary limitations were necessary to protect Iranian nation from evil operations that foreign agents, including Israeli one, are conducting against the safety of the nation. It was also absolutely vital to prevent huge cyber attacks against Iran and its infrastructure, and to disrupt communications among terrorist networks, coordinating terror operations from within our cities. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.